Welcome back to Skyrider Limited. Today on the Kite Bag Tour, we are strolling down memory lane. So today on the Kite Bag Tour, I wanted to stroll back in time a little bit and look at our first pair sponsor. So I've talked about before, my dad and I flew together from when I was very, very young. He got into sport kites on his honeymoon. Well, he got into kites on his honeymoon and sport kites shortly after and began flying with a team. And when I got old enough, he and I started flying together as a pair called Air Atlantis. That was also the name of his original team. And we became the sort of offshoot pair and went to competition. For the first couple of years, we flew kites that he bought for us at various spots. I think a lot of stuff came from High Flyers Flight Company, which was the kite shop in Newport, Rhode Island, or Kites Over Boston, which was the kite shop in Boston. At some point in late 1993, after getting hooked in with our first quadline sponsor for the two of us, we ended up, he ended up meeting Peter Warba, who was Buena Vista Kites, and Peter signed on to sponsor the pair. Peter sponsored us for a number of years through, I think, about 1999-ish. We flew several different generations of kites for Peter. You've seen some of the Buena Vista kites in the indoor kite video, where we saw the Feather, the X4I, and a prototype version of the Feather as well. Today we're going to look at some of the pairs kites, as well as some of the individual kites that my dad and I had from Buena Vista and from Peter. And we're going to start with what was our first pair of kites from Peter, the XTC X10s. So Buena Vista Kite Company was based in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And Peter worked out of that area. My dad had met him at, I think, KTA, Kite Trade Association show, when he was helping one of our other sponsors at the show. And Peter built us a number of kites, and this is probably my favorite of all of the pairs kites. This is the X10. So the XTCs, sorry, a little blustery in the driveway today. The XTCs were his series of dual line kites at the time. The X10 was a larger team kite version. And you can see this kite is big, big, big. I will back up so you can get a real sense of just how big it is. It uses a G-force frame, but it's the 40-inch version of the tube, not the 32-inch. So it's quite big. And these were sort of Peter's colors, a lot of purples and teals. And my favorite Reuben showed up quite frequently, and we'll circle back on that here with the next kite as well. They were big, stable. They made really good team kites. In recent years, I've flown the kite some more and have discovered that it's actually reasonably trick capable. One of the prettiest big flat axles and 540s you'll ever see a kite do. And so this was mine. Some of the interesting stuff, a little extra wear protection was pretty common back then. That's a old pencil grip. All the fittings are hardened vinyl tube. And like I said, it's a G-force spreaders leading edge, protruded spine, and top spreader. So let me go grab my dad's so you can see the pair together. So you can see they would be quite something to see flying, in formation, being as they are just so big and imposing. So this set was done for us. They're dated for 1994, and we flew them for the 94 season before moving on to a kite that sort of changed the face of what Peter was doing and kind of fit into the evolution of sport kites, where right around this time, there's some new developments going in the UK, and Peter's one of the first American designers to jump on the new shapes and progress in that direction. But before we get there, I want to show you a couple of other the XTCs in the collection, including another set of kites we flew for pairs, our XTC Vents. So 1995 arrived, and with it came some additional kites. Um, we were developing as a pair. The X10s were unbelievably good ultralights and flew into standard when, and we were flying them sort of as standards. But it was very clear that given how small I was, we needed a dedicated vent. And so Peter produced this kite for us. I'm pretty sure it was already in his line, but he made a pair of them for us. This one is mine. This is an XTC, normal size XTC vent. And this was sort of a game changer. It was just the second vent we had owned and flown as a pair, but just a very, very capable kite. Peter didn't actually love doing vents, and in later kites he would actually prefer to do sail breaks to slow down kites, and we would use something called a screen, which if you've been around for a while, you may remember line screens that went between the bridles and line to create drag and decrease pull that way. So we would switch to that after the XTCs. In 1995, he also did a kite for me, which was originally framed as a feather and then got reframed as a standard to match my dad's standards framing. But he also built my dad a very special standard XTC. So similar frame to this kite. Again, this kite and the standard share an Avia G-force and pultruded mixed frame, all Icarics. And they were wonderful kites to fly. Again, surprisingly modern shapes. Peter was frequently ahead of his time, as we'll see when we get into some of the later kites. And, you know, the things he was doing were also sort of new and novel at the same time. Because we have to remember, Peter has started building kites around the same time that a number of manufacturers started, similar timelines to companies like Prism. So, developing very quickly alongside a number of other West Coast manufacturers that are making big leaps and bounds in sport kites in America. Sit tight. I'm going to grab my dad's standard XTC because it's kind of special, and I wanted to share what really is sort of a work of art here with all of you before we dive into the kites that sort of shape a lot of things that were to come, both in colors and in flying for us. So my dad's standard is what's called a fragmented or patchwork kite. Sometimes people refer them as scrap kites, though I'm fairly certain Peter didn't just do this as scrap, but actually cut panels deliberately for these, fit them into a sail, and then cut the sail plan out of it. Peter had a remarkable way of doing these kites. He did a number of them where, despite the graphics seeming random, they flew with such great balance, and this kite's no exception. In ripstop and G-force, and just beautiful. So the team logo was sort of a sport kite silhouette with a all black wing, and then a wing that progressed red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple through the rainbow on the opposite side. So Peter did this and one or two other kites for us in our team colors, separate of the stuff he did in the sort of Buena Vista colors. And this kite is, you know, lovely and flew very well. And again, you know, just that wing shape was fairly ahead of its time, a little bit of camber, what I would call a moderate sail depth for the era. By modern standards, the tunnel is fairly underdeveloped, but just way ahead of its time for when it was done, and just really showcases how clever Peter was, and the stuff that he was sort of developing. So sit tight, and we're going to take the quantum leap I mentioned earlier, and we're going to look at a kite that informs a whole bunch of other kites that you've seen previously as well. So the XTCs would be with us for just the 95 season. In 1996, Peter released a new kite that was a fairly big change in plan form, both for him and for kites in general. And it bears resemblance to a couple of other kites that came out at a similar time, but is fairly uniquely West Coast. Um, Similar in aspect ratio to the Stranger, similar in size to the Stranger as well, but with its attitude all its own. The Buena Vista Sonic came out in 1996, and when it came out, we transitioned to it as a pairs kite, still framed in G-force, a full size, but with much higher aspect. You can see how short that spine is compared to the XTCs. This was a fairly standard colorway for Peter in that time. We called it the Gray Ghost. Peter did make one change to the standard Gray Ghost scheme for us. He put a Reuben wingtip on the kites, one on each side. This is my dad's kite, was on Flyer's left, my right, as I'm standing facing you, and mine was on the opposite side. Remember that, because that's going to come back when we talk about this colorway later. So we flew these for 96 and 1997, I believe, and actually flew them to third at Nationals in 1997 in Wildwood, New Jersey. This might be my favorite pairs kite we ever had, though certainly not as... So obviously the kites evolved and they got better and more capable as we went on, but this kite always had a special place in my heart, probably because it was our first Nationals podium. But I also, over the years, have taken out Sonics. We have two standard Gray Ghosts as well, and flown them a number of times. And I'm always amazed at how the kite is so up to date, even now. A number of more modern tricks are perfectly doable on this kite. It was a really clever creation, and Peter was, as he frequently was, very ahead of his time. All Icarus again. The sort of one big oddity on this case, probably the top spreader center tee, which was a fad that came and went in the sort of middle 90s. We switched to APA fittings for the first time here, though he continued with his preferred hard vinyl standoff connectors. And something I didn't mention on the other kites, but Peter also didn't like exposed sail connections, something that we've seen a lot of in more recent years. Would actually sew a pocket to protect the standoff from snagging on the back as well. Really nice kite. Peter always made a good kite. Every kite we ever had from him was so well made. So yeah, these are the Sonics. 1996 Buena Vista Sonic. So sit tight, and we're going to see the next kite that followed the Sonic. And then we'll look at a couple of sort of Buena Vista side quests. So in late 1997, Peter came out with a new kite. The new kite would have a slightly lower aspect ratio, would go to 4 standoffs, would generally be a next milestone forward from the Sonic. And that kite is called the Catalyst. So this one is mine. You can see that Reuben wingtip switching sides here. Again in G-force and a via protruded. Now switching like the Sonic to the APAs. We would fly this kite for the 98 and 99 seasons. During 1999, Peter would partner up with HQ, the same company that was doing, obviously, HQ kites. HQ Invento at the time in the U.S. Was also doing a number of designers' kites. And Buena Vista would become another brand under their umbrella. And there'd be another couple of kites that would come out during that time. And the Catalyst would continue its production with HQ. This kite we flew up until the 1999 season, when we would, right before Nationals, switch to a new manufacturer as sponsor. Unfortunately, while our relationship with Peter was wonderful, our relationship with HQ never really developed. We would get one kite after this, kite called the Pulse, which, to be honest, I don't remember a ton about. We got a set that were also in a production version of the Gray Ghost with red wingtips instead of Reuben. I believe those kites also switched from Icarus to Ventex. I want to say it was a good kite, but I just don't honestly remember. And it would be one of Peter's last. Not long after that, HQ would discontinue most of Buena Vista. Peter's work was pretty prolific. Like I said, way ahead of his time. This is we're talking about a kite that came out in 1998 with a turbo bridle here. Just lots of things that were, big developments. And every time he did it, shortly after, it felt like you'd see it everywhere. This kite sort of heralds the beginning of the cambered era. There's another kite missing from the collection besides the Pulse, and that's the Blur, which was a beginner kite similar to this, that also had this sort of, started the cambered leading edges and things like that. These were great kites, and Peter was a brilliant designer. And I'm really glad that I got to share, we still have these so I could share them with you all. Sit tight, I'm going to show you two last kites, one from the HQ era and one from further back in the Buena Vista timeline. So before I move on from the Catalyst, I wanted to share two other kites with you. So the Catalyst was also the kite we were flying when we met another pair. So my dad and I flew as Air Atlantis, which I mentioned previously, and we had met another pair that flew under the name Animal Crackers. That was Tim and Sue Boyle. And they were flying Bad Boys and a few things like that at the time, and we spoke to Peter and got them a set of catalysts for pairs use. And ultimately, we joined with them and formed a team called Air Crackers. And Peter made us a set of team kites. So the standard catalysts were sort of a stock colorway that he had come into during the HQ time of purple and yellow. But he also made us two sets of catalysts that, to my knowledge, are the only ones that got built. So this kite here, which is an ultralight catalyst, and just uses sort of one step down in framing from the standard. So from G-Force SUL to G-Force UL, and down to smaller protruded. So he did them in this sort of washed out gray ghost, not gray ghost color scheme for the ULs. And probably the rarest of the bunch is this kite here. And this is one of 5 vented catalysts. So you can see the laundry basket mesh in here. Nice big mesh. Small amount of mesh, but very effective. This kite was also a production HQ sail that he modified to use as the vents. So it is a production HQ sail. You can see that in the Ventex sail material, but it is untagged because Peter got it before finishing and then built the vents out of them. So those are pretty cool, pretty rare. They switch from the hard center tees to these Avia center tees, the hex fitting carbon center tees. Just a little bit more reinforced to go along with its venting. But again, just kind of a rare kite I wanted to take a minute and share with you guys. From there, we're going to jump to one of the kites that came out during the HQ window. So there were 2 kites that came out during the HQ, and unfortunately, this one is probably one of the worst conditioned kites in our collection. Missing a standoff, and there's a tear here on the sail that I need to figure out fixing. But this is a Buena Vista Vibe. So I mentioned the Pulse, which was the last pairs kite we flew. We would transition to that for the 98 and part of the 99 season before we switched sponsors. And then this kite came out alongside the Pulse, and that was the Vibe. Vibe was meant to be a little bit more of an introductory kite, smaller, price point, and a lot of fun, all protruded. That was a good little kite, easy to learn on and easy to fly. But obviously, because we were competing, not a kite we spent a lot of time with. Also in all Ventex here, with Peter's sort of preferred Dacron belly that he had gone to, this reinforced belly that he preferred. It was a nice little kite and did its job well. Um, so that's this guy here. So hang tight. I'm going to get one final Buena Vista kite out to show you guys, and then we will wrap up, and I will send you along your way. So today's last kite is kind of an example of one of Peter's sort of other things he liked to do, which was collaborate with other builders. Um, I showed you an X4i in the indoor kite video. This little guy is a collaboration between Peter and another San Francisco kite personality that we met in the one of the single line videos, and that's Ty from High as a Kite. So Peter made 6 of these. These are X4 Tie-dye, he called them. They are based on his X4W, which was the X4 for wind as opposed of the X4 for indoor, and featured ties, tie-dyed sail material, and a slightly beefier pultruded frame. They were fun little things, quick and nimble, and this one's pretty special because it's one of 6 that got made. And I just wanted to share, something really special out of the collection with you guys. A fun little kite. We didn't fly it a ton because it was more of a collector's item that Peter sent us to have. But really pretty and with ties, beautiful tie-dyeing on it in this great sort of blues and purples. So that's a stroll through Buena Vista. I hope you enjoyed that and enjoyed sort of my dad's and my pair story and the story of Peter and Buena Vista. As always, thank you for liking and subscribing and sharing, and we will see you out there, Skyrider.